In the dead of night, the city sleeps, but not all is silent. A lone RV broadcasts a robotic warning, echoing through empty streets. A man trapped in darkness fights to survive a kidnapping that was never supposed to be discovered. And somewhere, a teenager plays cop with a loaded gun, a fake badge, and no one to stop him. These aren't stories from movies. These are moments where fear took form, trust became deadly, and survival was the only option. Welcome to the world where danger wears a familiar face, and every shadow could be the last thing you see.
Before today's story begins, a warning. If you have a weak heart, stop the video now. Put on your headphones, turn off the lights. I'm Azad, and you're watching Chomchom. Today's terrifying real experience was sent by our viewer, Rayhan. Let's step into the darkness.
On December 25th, 2020, in the eerily quiet streets of downtown Nashville, Tennessee, something deeply unsettling began to unfold. Just before dawn, when the city should have been wrapped in peaceful silence, a strange mechanical voice shattered the calm. A white RV sat parked along 2nd Avenue North. At first glance, it looked ordinary, just another vehicle resting in the cold morning air. But then the voice began. It wasn't human. It was a robotic, emotionless female voice echoing through the empty streets like a ghost trapped inside a machine. All buildings in this area must be evacuated now. This vehicle will detonate. Evacuate immediately. The message repeated over and over, growing more urgent with each cycle. The sound bounced off the surrounding buildings, creating an unnatural echo that sent chills down the spines of anyone who heard it. Residents nearby awoke in confusion and fear, peeking through windows into the dim, blue-tinted darkness. Some thought it was a prank. Others felt something far worse. Moments later, something even more bizarre happened. Music began to play. From the same RV, distorted fragments of the 1964 song Downtown by Petula Clark drifted into the air. The cheerful melody clashed horribly with the warning message, creating a surreal and haunting contrast, like a lullaby played at the edge of disaster. By around 6:30 a.m., police officers arrived on the scene after receiving reports of the strange broadcast. Their body cameras captured the tension as they cautiously approached the RV. One officer muttered, "This feels like something out of a horror movie." Another compared it to The Purge, a world where rules vanish and chaos takes over. Despite the confusion, the officers acted fast. They began knocking on doors, urging people to leave immediately. "You're not in trouble, but you need to evacuate. This is serious." The streets slowly filled with uneasy movement, people stepping out in pajamas, clutching phones, whispering in fear. The robotic voice continued its relentless warning, now sounding almost impatient, almost alive. Then, at exactly 6 a.m., the tone changed. The voice became sharper, louder. "This vehicle will detonate in 15 minutes." A countdown had begun. The officers increased their urgency, pushing everyone farther away. The cold morning air now carried something heavier than fear. It carried inevitability. Something terrible was coming, and the voice, it knew.
The chilling countdown had begun.
As the mechanical voice echoed through the empty streets of Nashville, the atmosphere grew heavier with each passing second. The once quiet morning had transformed into something deeply unsettling, like the city itself was holding its breath.
This vehicle will detonate in 15 minutes. Evacuate now. The message repeated again and again, each time more intense, more urgent, like a warning from something beyond human control. The sound crawled under the skin of the officers and residents alike. Police officers moved quickly, their boots striking the pavement with urgency. Body cam footage later revealed their tense voices as they pushed people farther away from the danger zone. You need to leave now. This is not a drill. Some residents hesitated, confused by the surreal situation. Others ran without question, fear taking over logic. The combination of the robotic warning and the eerie silence of the early morning created a nightmare-like atmosphere. And then, the music returned. Fragments of Downtown by Petula Clark began playing again from the RV, but this time it felt different, distorted, warped, almost mocking. The cheerful tone of the song clashed violently with the looming threat, creating an almost psychological horror. It was as if the vehicle itself was alive, taunting the city. Inside that RV was Anthony Quinn Warner, a 63-year-old man whose actions would soon shock the entire nation. Unknown to those evacuating, he had carefully planned this moment. By now, the streets were nearly empty. Police had successfully cleared most of the area, guiding civilians to safety. Their quick thinking would later be credited with saving countless lives. The voice continued. 10 minutes. Evacuate now. Time felt distorted. Every second stretched longer than it should. Officers exchanged uneasy glances. No one truly knew what kind of explosion they were dealing with or how powerful it would be. Then, silence. For a brief, terrifying moment, the voice stopped completely. No warning, no music, just stillness. And in that silence, something far worse settled in. The realization that the explosion could happen at any second. At approximately 6:30 a.m., the unthinkable happened. A blinding flash tore through the darkness. Then came the explosion. A massive blast erupted from the RV, shaking the ground like an earthquake. The force ripped through buildings, shattering windows, tearing apart walls, and sending debris flying through the air. A thick cloud of smoke and dust swallowed the street. The shockwave could be felt blocks away. More than 50 buildings were damaged, some partially collapsing under the force. The explosion struck near the AT&T transmission building, causing major communication disruptions across the region. The scene looked apocalyptic. But amidst the destruction, something remarkable stood out. There were no immediate fatalities among the public. Because of the warnings, because of the evacuation, lives had been saved. Only one life was lost in the blast. The man inside the RV. The one who started it all.
In the aftermath of the explosion, downtown Nashville looked like a scene frozen in time after an apocalypse. Smoke drifted through the air like restless spirits. Broken glass covered the streets, and alarms echoed from damaged buildings. Emergency responders rushed into the chaos, their voices cutting through the eerie silence that followed the blast. The devastation was massive, but the mystery was even deeper. Who would orchestrate something so calculated, yet issue warnings that saved lives?
As investigators began piecing together the puzzle, all evidence pointed back to one man, Anthony Quinn Warner. The 63-year-old was described as a quiet, isolated individual who rarely interacted with others. He lived a reclusive life, keeping mostly to himself. But beneath that silence, something far more disturbing had been growing. Authorities soon uncovered that Warner was deeply obsessed with bizarre conspiracy theories, particularly involving shape-shifting alien lizards secretly controlling the world. His beliefs had slowly detached him from reality, creating a fractured perception of truth. But that wasn't all. A shocking revelation came from his past. About 16 months before the explosion, Warner's girlfriend had reported him to the police, claiming he was building explosives inside an RV parked outside his home. However, when officers arrived, Warner refused to let them inspect the vehicle, and due to legal limitations, they couldn't proceed further. It was a missed opportunity, one that would later haunt the investigation. Even more chilling was a statement from one of his neighbors. Just days before Christmas, the neighbor had casually asked Warner, "Did Santa bring you anything good this year?" Warner reportedly replied with a calm but deeply unsettling answer. "Oh yeah, Nashville and the world are never going to forget me." At the time, it sounded strange. After the explosion, it sounded like a prophecy. Despite extensive investigation, authorities never found a single clear motive. There was no manifesto, no direct explanation, no final message that clearly defined his intent. However, experts later suggested that several factors may have contributed to his actions. One of the most significant was a possible terminal illness. Reports indicated that Warner may have been dealing with a severe health condition, possibly cancer. Combined with his isolation and deteriorating mental state, it may have pushed him toward this final act. And yet, there was something undeniably haunting about the way he carried it out. The warnings, the countdown, the eerie robotic voice, the distorted music. It didn't feel like a sudden act of chaos. It felt staged, calculated, like a dark performance designed to be remembered forever. In the end, Warner ensured exactly what he had promised. The world would never forget him. Not as a hero, not as a victim, but as a ghost in the machine, whose voice still echoes in one of the strangest and most chilling incidents in modern history.
Before the most terrifying part of the story begins, I need to ask, are you listening from somewhere isolated right now? Is your heart starting to race? Don't forget to tell me in the comments. And if you're new here, subscribe or follow now to join this journey into fear.
The job that was never real. On March 9th, 2023, at approximately 12:30 p.m., a chilling 911 call came in from a busy area in Cleveland, Ohio. The caller's voice was frantic, shaky, barely holding itself together. A man had just burst into a small food market on Central Avenue, gasping for breath, his body trembling as if he had just escaped something unimaginable. "I've been kidnapped! They had guns! They tied me up!" When police arrived, they found the victim exactly as described, terrified, disoriented, and visibly shaken. What made the situation even more disturbing were the physical signs still present on his body. Plastic zip ties hung loosely from his wrists. Duct tape residue clung to his arms and face. It wasn't just a story, it was real. The entire interaction was captured on body cam footage as officers tried to calm him down and piece together what had happened. Through broken sentences and labored breathing, the victim explained everything. Earlier that day, he had gone to a house for what he believed was a simple plumbing job. He had been hired to fix a leaking pipe and install a water line for a refrigerator. Nothing unusual, just routine work. But the moment he stepped inside, everything changed. When I got downstairs, another guy came out. They had guns on me. His voice cracked as the memory replayed in his mind. According to the victim, the man who hired him had lured him into the basement under the pretense of showing him the problem. But it was all a trap. Waiting in the shadows was another man, armed, silent, watching. Within seconds, the situation spiraled into a nightmare. The attackers pulled out their weapons, forcing the victim to comply. There was no chance to fight back, only fear and survival. They took his phone, his belongings, his control. Then they restrained him using zip ties and duct tape, binding him like he was nothing more than an object. The basement, once just a workspace, became something far more sinister. A place of confinement, a place of fear. The victim described how plastic sheets had been laid out on the floor, which made the situation even more disturbing. It wasn't random. It felt prepared, planned, deliberate. They had plastic on the ground, like they were ready. Those words sent a chill through the officers listening, because it suggested something far darker than robbery. It suggested intention, something that could have gone much, much worse. After tying him up, the kidnappers forced him out of his house and into the back of his own van. One of them sat beside him, watching his every move, making sure he didn't even think about escaping. The doors slammed shut, and just like that, he disappeared. As the van drove through the streets, the victim realized something terrifying. No one knew where he was. No one was coming to help. And whatever these men had planned, he was completely at their mercy.
The van moved steadily through the streets of Cleveland, but inside, time felt frozen. Bound tightly with zip ties, the victim lay helpless in the back, every bump in the road sending waves of panic through his body. The air inside felt suffocating, thick with fear and uncertainty. One of the kidnappers sat beside him, silent, watching, making sure there was no escape. The man's breathing grew heavier as reality sank in. This wasn't just a robbery. This was something far worse. According to the victim's statement, the kidnappers didn't just want his belongings, they wanted money, a lot of it. At some point during the drive, they forced him to unlock his phone and contact a friend. With a gun pressed close and fear controlling his every word, he had no choice but to obey. Call them. Tell them to bring $15,000 or you're not getting out. His voice trembled as he made the call, trying desperately not to reveal what was happening. Every second felt like a ticking clock, counting down to something unknown. Meanwhile, the kidnappers made a crucial move. They turned off location tracking on his phone. It was a small detail, but it meant everything. It meant they didn't want to be found. It meant they had done this before, or at least thought it through carefully. The van continued moving, eventually reaching an area near East 49th Street. The streets were not completely empty, but not crowded enough to guarantee safety. The victim's mind raced. This might be his only chance. As the van slowed down slightly, just for a moment, something inside him snapped. A survival instinct took over, overpowering the fear that had been holding him hostage. Without warning, he jumped. Throwing himself out of the moving van, he hit the ground hard, pain shooting through his body, but adrenaline pushed him forward. He didn't stop. He ran as fast as he could. Behind him, the kidnappers didn't immediately follow. Perhaps they were shocked. Perhaps they didn't want to draw attention. Whatever the reason, that moment of hesitation saved his life. The victim sprinted down the street, his hands still partially bound, his body weak, but his will unbreakable. Then he saw it, a small convenience store, light, people, safety. He burst through the door, collapsing inside, gasping for air. Customers turned in shock as he tried to explain what had just happened. "They kidnapped me. Please, call the police." The public setting worked in his favor. The kidnappers had no choice but to flee. They drove off, disappearing into the city, leaving behind their victim, their plan, and a trail that would soon lead back to them. When officers later investigated the case, they uncovered a disturbing connection. The main suspect was identified as Ahmed Johnson, a 51-year-old man who had previously been in federal prison, where he had crossed paths with the victim. This wasn't random. This was targeted, planned, personal, and now the hunt had begun.
The van moved steadily through the streets of Cleveland, but inside, time felt frozen. Bound tightly with zip ties, the victim lay helpless in the back, every bump in the road sending waves of panic through his body. The air inside felt suffocating, thick with fear and uncertainty. One of the kidnappers sat beside him, silent, watching, making sure there was no escape. The man's breathing grew heavier as reality sank in. This wasn't just a robbery. This was something far worse. According to the victim's statement, the kidnappers didn't just want his belongings. They wanted money, a lot of it. At some point during the drive, they forced him to unlock his phone and contact a friend. With a gun pressed close and fear controlling his every word, he had no choice but to obey. "Call them. Tell them to bring $15,000 or you're not getting out." His voice trembled as he made the call, trying desperately not to reveal what was happening. Every second felt like a ticking clock, counting down to something unknown. Meanwhile, the kidnappers made a crucial move. They turned off location tracking on his phone. It was a small detail, but it meant everything. It meant they didn't want to be found. It meant they had done this before, or at least thought it through carefully. The van continued moving, eventually reaching an area near East 49th Street. The streets were not completely empty, but not crowded enough to guarantee safety. The victim's mind raced. This might be his only chance. As the van slowed down slightly, just for a moment, something inside him snapped. A survival instinct took over, overpowering the fear that had been holding him hostage. Without warning, he jumped, throwing himself out of the moving van. He hit the ground hard, pain shooting through his body, but adrenaline pushed him forward. He didn't stop. He ran, as fast as he could. Behind him, the kidnappers didn't immediately follow.
Perhaps they were shocked. Perhaps they didn't want to draw attention. Whatever the reason, that moment of hesitation saved his life. The victim sprinted down the street, his hands still partially bound, his body weak, but his will unbreakable. Then he saw it, a small convenience store. Light, people, safety. He burst through the door, collapsing inside, gasping for air. Customers turned in shock as he tried to explain what had just happened. "They kidnapped me. Please, call the police." The public setting worked in his favor. The kidnappers had no choice but to flee. They drove off, disappearing into the city, leaving behind their victim, their plan, and a trail that would soon lead back to them. When officers later investigated the case, they uncovered a disturbing connection. The main suspect was identified as Ahmed Johnson, a 51-year-old man who had previously been in federal prison, where he had crossed paths with the victim. This wasn't random. This was targeted, planned, personal, and now the hunt had begun.
Before the most terrifying part of the story begins, I need to ask, are you listening from somewhere isolated right now? Is your heart starting to race? Don't forget to tell me in the comments. And if you're new here, subscribe or follow now to join this journey into fear.
On September 9th, 2019, under the blazing afternoon sun of Albuquerque, New Mexico, a routine patrol took a strange and unsettling turn. An officer from the Albuquerque Police Department was driving along the highway when something unusual caught his attention. Up ahead, a gray Nissan SUV was pulled over on the side of the road. That alone wasn't strange, but the person conducting the traffic stop was. The man standing beside the vehicle didn't look like a police officer at all. He wore jeans, a black polo shirt, and an Air Force-style cap. There was no official uniform, no marked patrol car, no visible badge, at least not one that looked legitimate from a distance. Still, he was acting like a cop, holding a notepad, questioning the driver, completely confident. Too confident. The officer immediately felt something was off. Pulling over, he stepped out of his vehicle and approached the scene carefully. His instincts kicked in, the kind that only come from years of experience. "Hey man, what's going on here?" The man turned, clearly startled. For a split second, his composure cracked. I'm with law enforcement, just handling a traffic stop." But his voice didn't match his words. It lacked authority. It lacked certainty. It lacked truth. The officer narrowed his eyes. "Do you have any ID on you?" A pause. Too long. "No, I left it with my uniform. I'm kind of under-equipped right now." Under-equipped? That wasn't how real officers talked. The situation was getting stranger by the second. The man then claimed his name was Brendan Wysinski, insisting he had been an officer for about 3 years. He even said he had pulled the driver over for speeding, claiming the vehicle was going over 120 miles per hour. But nothing added up. No badge, no proper vehicle, no record, and most importantly, no proof. The officer, now fully suspicious, decided to separate him from the driver and ask more direct questions. "Which department are you with?" The answers became inconsistent, messy, contradictory. Every response created more doubt than clarity. The tension in the air thickened. What started as a simple check was quickly turning into something far more serious. Because if this man wasn't a real officer, then what was he doing? And more importantly, how long had he been doing it? The officer made a decision. He placed Brendan in the back of his patrol car, not under arrest yet, but detained, just until things could be verified.
Inside the car, Brendan's nervousness grew. His breathing became uneven. His confidence began to fade. And then, the truth started to crack through. Less than 5 minutes later, unable to hold the lie any longer, he finally said it. "I'm not a cop." Silence filled the patrol car. But, strangely, that wasn't the most disturbing part. Because pretending to be a police officer wasn't just illegal, it was dangerous. And something about this situation suggested it could have become much worse. The moment the words left his mouth, "I'm not a cop," the entire situation shifted. What had started as suspicion was now confirmed. But instead of relief, a heavier tension filled the air. Because now the question wasn't if he was lying, it was how far those lies went. Sitting in the back of the patrol car, Brendan Wysinski looked smaller than before. The confidence he had shown on the roadside was gone, replaced with nervous glances and shaky breaths. But even after confessing, he didn't stop talking. And that's where things got even stranger. When questioned further, Brendan began to spin a completely different story. He claimed the badge he used belonged to his father, someone he said had worked in law enforcement and was killed in the line of duty years ago. It sounded emotional, convincing at first, but there was one problem. Just minutes earlier, he had already admitted that he bought the badge online. The contradiction was immediate, obvious, and deeply unsettling. The officer, now fully aware he was dealing with someone unpredictable, kept pressing him for answers. Brendan continued to shift his story, trying to reshape reality in real time. He changed his age, he changed his background, he even claimed to be married, despite being only 18 years old. Nothing was consistent, nothing felt real. It was like talking to someone who had built an identity out of fragments and now watching it collapse piece by piece. But then, the situation took a darker turn. Almost casually, Brendan admitted something that made the officer pause. "There's a gun in the glove compartment. It's loaded." For a brief moment, silence took over. A loaded weapon, in the possession of someone pretending to be a police officer. The danger instantly escalated, because this wasn't just impersonation anymore. This was a situation that could have turned violent very quickly. The officer stepped out, his movements now more controlled, more cautious. Backup was already on the way, but until they arrived, every second mattered. Because now they had to consider a terrifying possibility. What if Brendan had decided to go further? What if the next driver he pulled over didn't question him? What if fear gave him control? The idea of an untrained teenager with a badge, a fake authority, and access to a weapon created a deeply disturbing picture. A stranger stopping cars, giving orders, possibly escalating situations he couldn't control. It wasn't hard to imagine how quickly things could spiral into something irreversible. Soon after, Brendan was officially placed under arrest. But even then, the unease didn't fade. Because this wasn't just about what he did, it was about what he could have done. And that possibility was far more terrifying.
By the time backup units arrived, the situation was fully under control. But the true extent of the danger was only beginning to unfold. Brendan Wysinski sat in silence, his earlier confidence completely gone. The roadside act, the authority, the fake identity, it had all collapsed within minutes. But what officers discovered next made the situation far more disturbing than simple impersonation. They searched his vehicle, and what they found changed everything. Inside the car was not just a fake badge or a few props.
There was gear, serious gear. Items that suggested preparation, not curiosity. A loaded firearm, handcuffs, equipment that could easily be used to control or detain someone. This wasn't a harmless fantasy anymore. This was a setup. A setup that in the wrong moment could have turned into something far more dangerous. Officers quickly secured the weapon, making sure there was no immediate threat. But the realization hit hard. If he had been allowed to continue, even for a few more days, the outcome could have been far more different. A fake traffic stop could turn into intimidation. Intimidation could turn into control. And control could turn into something no one could undo. At the station, the questioning continued. Brendan tried to explain himself, but his story kept shifting. One moment he claimed he was trying to help. Another moment, he suggested he just wanted to feel like an officer. But none of it justified what he had done. Because pretending to be law enforcement isn't just illegal, it breaks a system built on trust. People are trained to obey police officers, to stop when signaled, to follow instructions without hesitation. That trust is what keeps order on the roads. And someone like Brendan had stepped directly into that trust, without the training, without the authority, and without the responsibility. That's what made it so dangerous. Eventually, the truth became clear. He had bought the badge online. He had no official connection to any law enforcement agency, and his entire identity during that traffic stop was fabricated. In March 2020, he was sentenced to probation. But even then, the story didn't end cleanly. Reports later revealed that he failed to follow the terms of his probation. He missed meetings, provided false information, and ignored required evaluations. As a result, the court tightened the conditions against him. It painted a clear picture. This wasn't just a one-time mistake, it was a pattern. A dangerous mindset that blurred the line between reality and control. In the end, what makes this case truly unsettling isn't just what happened, it's what could have happened. A fake badge, a loaded weapon, an unstable identity, all combined into one person, standing on the side of a road with the power to stop anyone. And for a brief moment, people believed him. That illusion was the most dangerous weapon of all.
And with that, tonight's terrifying story comes to an end. But remember, the deeper the night grows, the thicker the hidden mysteries become. Follow or subscribe now for more horrifying stories, if you dare.